Hello, it's your angry Native American again. I want to talk to you about something. People keep on talking about the Spanish flu and COVID-19. And there's two things that people really don't get. Back during the Spanish flu, no, they did not have mandatory quarantine in a lot of places or mandatory masks. Because a lot of people did it anyways. They did it because they knew. And the second thing is the reason they knew. They knew because back then, only 35% or less people had phone systems. So when somebody was struck sick in their home, 9 times out of 10, they had to go to somebody else's home, or people watched as somebody ran down the street, worried, upset, stressed, to go get a doctor. The other thing is back then, they also didn't have the same hospital systems. They didn't have ICUs like we do now. A lot of the patients were gathered into one big room, and there may have been 20, 50, 60, 100 people in one room. There may have been a tent put over these people. Look up the pictures for it. You'll see it. So family members that came and visited their loved ones in the hospital, because back then they didn't have it like we have it now. They would hear all these other people suffering, moaning. And the little bit of phone service that they did have, people were calling other people they knew around the nation and around the world, telling them what their experience. So much so that AT&T had to ask people to stop using the phone so that it could be there for emergency calls, because they were just jamming up the phone service. Another thing is those that did have phone service, it wasn't like our phone service today. You couldn't just pick up the phone and you had a private line and you said hi to your friends and nobody else was listening. You picked up that phone, you may have heard somebody else talking about what was happening to their family member, that their family member got the flu. And on top of that, you had an operator. She would ask you what number you wanted, who you wanted to get connected to. And quite often, the people of the community had a connection to these operators. I mean, that operator knew what Sally Sue clear across the state was doing compared to what Mary Jane here in her town was doing. Because these people were distraught. And some of them just needed somebody to talk to if they couldn't get a hold of the people they needed. Or if they lost somebody. Sometimes the operator was the only person they could talk to. So they did. So the virus was more visible. They even, for hospitals, once they filled up, they didn't have the infrastructure we have now where they could instantly turn another building into a hospital. No, they erected tents outside. And the general public would walk by these tents and hear these people suffering in the tents. It was not like it is today. And I honestly believe that's why people are not taking the masks seriously. That's why they're not taking the quarantine seriously. Because people are not being exposed to it like they were back then. It is so hidden now. We have the ICUs. The patients have, individual rooms. We don't have people bunched up 100 at a time in one big, like, auditorium type room. So it's hidden. When we pick up the phone and call the hospital, we don't have an operator listening in or half the neighborhood. It's just you and 911 who hears you. So people aren't taking it seriously. Because if they don't see it in their little area, it's not as bad as what you think it is. So how can we remedy that? How can we stop that? How can we let people see how serious this really is? There's only a few things I could think of. Doctors and nurses taking videos of what's going on in their hospitals and posting it online on all forms of social media so that people can find it, so it can be seen, and just posting every day of their life during COVID so that they can see the suffering the patients are going through. Yes, take measures to protect the patient's anonymity. Let the people see and hear it. Taking a projector system and sound system and having these videos projected on the side of every single freaking hospital in the United States of America. If you're in Texas, you take the videos for the day from every hospital in Texas and you project it onto the side of your hospitals. So people walking by see it. Like they did in the 1800s. When somebody died of the flu and they were taken out of that tent. Everybody's seen it. Everybody knew it. Everybody could feel it. Everybody could textualize it. They could smell it. It was there. It was real. Right now, COVID isn't real to people. How can it be real? They hear all these talking points about it. They hear how, oh, there's this many people in this hospital, and there's that many people in that hospital, and this many people died, and this many people survived. But they're not hearing the suffering of it. They're not hearing the family members who are present when their loved one dies. They're not hearing the phone calls. They're not watching the citizens run down the street to go get a doctor, to go get help, because their loved one is dying. Because not everybody had cars back then either. The only way people are going to take it seriously is if they're not exposed to it by being out there without their masks and stuff, but if they're exposed to it by what the experience really is. They need to be exposed to it. We're sheltering our society way too much from things like this. Because when you shelter people from it, they don't get how serious it is. And so they don't take it serious. They run around and talk about their constitutional right to not wear a mask and ignore other people's constitutional right not to be infected by a virus. Ignore others' constitutional right to live. Because they don't see it. They don't hear it. And especially when they're out there getting things that show that some places aren't testing properly. So they don't know how many cases there are out there. Some places aren't counting their numbers properly. So they don't know if the number is higher or lower. They don't stop and think. It doesn't matter if the number is higher and lower. What matters is the virus is present. And you can catch it. But they don't feel that because they don't experience it. So let's all brainstorm and see how we can maybe start calling for people to make this COVID more visible to people, more textual, more experience, so that they can really get a feel of how serious it is. And stop ignoring it. And stop hollering about their personal right to wear a mask or not wear a mask. And talk about somebody's personal right to live or die. Because as long as we hide it, nobody's going to take it serious. Nobody's going to care. I even think that they should put a loudspeaker outside the dispatch center and start broadcasting all the 911 calls that come in. You know, just a recording of all the 911 calls concerning COVID-19 that come in your state. Let people hear it. It'd be the equivalent of what it was during 1918. Where people could hear what was going on, where people could see what was going on, where people could see the loved ones who are suffering when their family members die. When the tents were setting out in the middle of a field somewhere with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sick people in there, moaning and suffering. Where they could see the dead as they were carried out of those tents and placed into a stretcher and hauled down to the mortuary. Where the child ran down the street to go get the doctor because their mother was too sick to care for them. Where the neighbor person came over and knocked on the door asking for somebody to call for medical assistance. Where the operator was present there to listen to those who were suffering. And the neighborhood could pick up the phone and hear it just as clear. Because until we do that, nobody's going to take this serious. And people out there, especially people like Trump, are going to continue to be able to downplay it, to make it sound like it's not as serious as it is. They're going to be able to make it so that for their own image or their own political point or whatever it is, that people are not going to go out there and do what's needed to be able to stop this and get back to work. Because until we start doing what's needed with wearing masks, social distancing, all of that, there's no way we're ever going to be able to open up. As long as there's people out there hollering, it's my constitutional right not to wear a mask, and making little fake cards to hand to some store owner about how their rights are being denied, and some fake claim about some organization, there's nothing we can do. because they're going to keep it up. So let's expose COVID for what it is. Start putting it out there. Because if we don't, it's not getting better. It's just going to get worse.